You are listening to TBR Radio Presents The DIXIE Heritage Show, with your host, the Director of DIXIE Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
All right, well, I've got author Julie Hawkins on the phone here, and we're going to talk about her award-winning book. So, I know that the book won the John Eston Koch Award. Tell us about some of the other awards that the book has won.
It made honorable mention at the LA Book Festival, and it won the 2012 Bragg Medallion, which is given to indie books, independently published books. And this book originally was published several years ago with iUniverse. I published it myself, self-published. And then I found a hybrid publisher, so it was with them for a while, and now it's with another new publisher called Westwood Books Publishing, and they're located in Florida.
And so the title of the book is A Beautiful Glittering Lie. How did you come up with the title A Beautiful Glittering Lie?
The beginning of each chapter starts with a quote from various Civil War characters, personalities, and such. And I read a lot of diaries and journals that soldiers had written, and I found this one quote that I loved, and so I kind of used it for the title. It's written by Henry Morton Stanley, CFA, and he wrote, "For it was the first field of glory I had seen in my May of life, and the first time that glory sickened me with its repulsive aspect and made me suspect it was all a glittering lie." And I just love that quote. So I used it for the title of my book.
And so this is the first, or book one of the Renegade series. Has book 2 and 3 or so forth been written yet?
Yes, they've both been written. There's been a fourth book written too. The second book, Beckoning Hellfire, just came out with Westwood Books. And the third one, Rebel Among Us, is in process. So it'll probably be out first part of May. And they've all been re-edited, and they've got brand new covers. And yeah, it's pretty exciting to have a fresh look on these books and get to tell the story all over again, just like it's brand new.
This might be an unfair question, but I'm gonna let our viewers in on the fact that you are also the lead singer of the Julie Hawkins band. What is your greater passion, the music or the writing?
Oh boy, that's a toss-up. I haven't done a lot with the music for quite a while. When we lived in Mississippi a few years ago, I was really involved with the Memphis Music Foundation, DeSoto Songwriters Group, and did a lot of performing at various festivals and things like that. But for now, I am just focusing on the writing, getting the fourth book in the series published.
So give us just one quick teaser here, something that would make somebody want to rush over to Amazon or to your website right now and look at these books.
In the spring of 1861, a country once united is fractured by war. Half of America fights for the Confederate cause, the other for unification. Rebel forces have already seized Fort Morgan and Fort Gaines. A new Confederate president has been elected, and the Constitution has been revised. In North Alabama, a farmer and a father of 3 decides to enlist. For Hiram Summers, it is the end of everything he has ever known. After Hiram travels to Virginia with the 4th Alabama Infantry Regiment, he is quickly thrust into combat. His son, David, who must stay behind, searches for adventure at home by traipsing to Huntsville with his best friend, Jake Kimball, to scrutinize invading Yankees. Meanwhile, Carolyn, Hiram's wife and David's mother, struggles to keep up with the farm as her world revolves around the letter she receives from her husband, whom she misses dearly. As Hiram and his son discover the true meaning of war, they soon realize that their choices have torn their family apart. In this historical tale, the naivete of young country is tested. A father sacrifices everything to defend his home, and a young man longs for adventure regardless of the perilous cost. So that kind of sums it up. Yeah, the whole series revolves around this family from North Alabama, so it's a family saga. It starts at the very beginning when President Davis is being sworn into office. and it goes through to the end of the war with book 3. And then book 4, which hasn't been published yet, will discuss Reconstruction and what happens after the war.
Your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
So, what is the weather like in Colorado right now?
It's actually pretty nice. It's in the 50s. We're expecting rain this afternoon, which is nice, change from snow. We got snow last week, a few inches, but it was gone the next day, you know, that time of year. So, yeah, it's not bad. It's going to be in the 70s later on this week into next week. Colorado's kind of weird because we don't really have spring or fall here. Mm-hmm. It's either summer or winter. We get like 1 or 2 weeks of spring and fall, and that's it.
Well, Florida's that way. It's either, summer or, summer.
Yeah, when we lived in Mississippi, it was nice because it really has all 4 seasons. But the humidity, oh my gosh. We were just right on the Mississippi there. Right. The Delta. Pretty humid.
So you had talked about your first book, A Beautiful Glittering Lie, but there are 3 other books in that series. Tell us about the other 3.
The second book in the series is called A Beckoning Hellfire. And the third one is A Rebel Among Us. A Beckoning Hellfire was just republished last month with Westwood Books Publishing. It takes up where the first book left off. It's actually Christmas Eve of 1862 where it starts. And it goes up through the Battle of Gettysburg. And then A Rebel Among Us starts directly after the battle, up through the end of the war. And then there's going to be a 4th book, and it takes up, and it's about Reconstruction, basically, and what happens with the characters after the war. And then my nonfiction book, Horses in Gray, is about Confederate Warhorses.
So was it about horses in general, or was it about specific horses?
A mix. There's a whole chapter dedicated to Little Sorrel, one to Traveler, and then it kind of splits off after that. It talks about Nathan Bedford Forrest's horses, Jeb Stuart's horses, John Mosby, Turner Ashby, and kind of then just a hodgepodge like Belle Boyd and John Hunt Morgan, and just, kind of a collection of everybody else that was anything about Confederate horses I could find is in this book. So kind of fun to research it.
I say, what was your interest? What drew you to study and write about horses?
Well, I've always loved horses, and I always wanted one, but I never got one. Luckily, my cousins had horses. But I've always been a horse lover, and it's kind of what my fiction books are about, too. It's about a Confederate cavalryman. A lot of horses in those stories, too. And the one main character, which is, his name's Renegade, and that's why I call it the Renegade Series. Because the main character's horse is named Renegade. But yeah, I just always had a love for horses. And then when we lived in Mississippi, I, learned more about the southern side of things and just thought it would be an interesting book to write. So I went ahead and did it.
Which book do you think was more enjoyable or was more thought-provoking for you, and as far as the creative process was concerned? Was it the fiction book or was it the nonfiction book?
I'd say the fiction for sure. It was kind of a weird thing. I took a trip to Gettysburg, and living in Colorado, I'd never seen a Civil War battlefield in my life. And of course, the Gettysburg battlefield is huge, so I was just overwhelmed by it all. And then I got inspired to write a book. And I thought, well, I haven't really read any books about a typical Confederate soldier and what it would have been like for him to go off to war. So I thought I'd write about that. And because I'm a horse lover, I decided he was going to join the cavalry. And the more research I did, the more everything fell into place. I just chose randomly a place in North Alabama, and it just happened to be the name of the little town is Ryan's Crossroads. Well, my maiden name is Ryan, and I thought, well, that's a sign. So that's where my character's from. And then I did more research, and I thought, well, if he's from North Alabama, he could have joined up with Forrest. But I started reading about Jeb Stuart, and I thought he was such a colorful character. Well, both of them, really. I mean, just amazing. But I thought Jeb Stuart was kind of fascinating to me because he was a music lover, and I'm a musician, and he was a horse lover, and he, had a great sense of humor and everything. And I just thought that would be a fun character to incorporate in my books, too.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, extra, read all about
The first book I wrote was Beckoning Hellfire, actually. And I kept writing and writing, and it got bigger, longer story. And, pretty soon I'm like, I need to split this book into two because it's getting to be an epic here, War and Peace. But anyway, so I split the book into two. So then I had a Beckoning Hellfire and a Rebel Among Us. And then I went back and wrote a prequel, Beautiful Glittering Light, which is the first book in the series, but actually the third book that I wrote, if that makes sense. And then I went back and I wrote a fourth book. And there's going to be a fifth, too, in the series that I haven't written yet. I've just been accumulating, research material for it. And I'm going to have the main character, his name's David Summers, I'm going to have him come out to Colorado. And so I'm going to incorporate my home state into that book and kind of talk about the whole mining that went on here. And it's pretty fascinating history, with Pikes Peak here and Colorado Springs and everything. It was a big, big gold mining camp. And there's a lot of history here, so.
What do you think is your anticipation of when you might actually start doing the serious work of writing on the fifth book? Or that's just one of those things that you'll get to it when you get to it?
I probably won't get to it till later next year. I'm going to go back and re-edit the fourth book first, the one that's about Reconstruction, and it's called A Double-Edged Sword. So I want to get that in print first, and that's going to take a little while because I need to rewrite some of the story and incorporate some other things. I was going to try and put something in there about the Confederate gold because I think that's pretty interesting.
Okay, you mentioned the lost Confederate gold. A lot of folks think that lost Confederate gold wound up in Michigan. Is that the path that you're pursuing, or are you going a totally different direction?
I'm going in a different direction. I used to work at a library when we lived in Mississippi, and I found this book about like a whole underground network of ex-Confederates who were hiding some of the gold on their property. It's kind of like the lost, what's it called? The Lost Dutchman's Mine or something, kind of, where there's supposedly hidden treasure. And this guy wrote this book about where he thinks it's all at. I think it's in Michigan, in the bottom of Lake Michigan, to be quite honest, because they think they found the train car or something. Did you hear about that?
No, I hadn't heard that yet. I know there's a town in Michigan was basically the mayor of the town was, as I understand the story, had been a Confederate officer, and he had been one of the Confederate officers who was responsible for guarding the Confederate treasury as they were moving it west towards the end of the war, trying to get it, away from the fall of Richmond and so forth. And there's all kinds of stuff in this town, public parks and different things that were built, libraries, schools that were built after the war, and the money shouldn't have been there, and it was all paid for by this one person. And if you look at one of the city parks, and if you look at all the landscaping in the park at an aerial view, you see a Confederate flag.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so the speculation was this was where the Confederate treasury wound up.
Yeah.
At least part of it, obviously, maybe not all of it, but at least part of it, Of course, you're probably referring more to like the Order of the Golden Circle. So I've got to ask the question then, does Jesse James make his way into the book? So
interesting characters are always popping up in my book, so you never know.
Right.
But it's a strong possibility.
Okay.
Welcome to the Christendom curriculum. Every parent who decides to homeschool wants to secure a great education for their child, while also saving time and money. But these days, many parents have another concern. They also want a homeschool curriculum without all the multiculturalist, politically correct diversity doctrine that's really little more than a thin disguise for an anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-Western civilization bias. Now there is such a curriculum. The Christendom curriculum gives your children a complete education in Bible, history, literature, and more, focusing on the classic academic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we also tell the story of Christendom, the story of the Christian nations, especially as Christ's kingdom has been historically manifest in the nations of Europe and America. And we do so without apology. The Christendom curriculum is the only Christian nationalist homeschool program you'll find. We support the right of the European and American peoples to their historic Christian cultures against the globalist leftists who want to destroy those cultures. Not only that, but we provide assigned reading courses for various hot-button subjects in our current culture wars, including feminism, social justice, and cultural Marxism, among others. These reading courses will teach your kids how to survive a social justice warrior attack, how to debate with leftists on social media, how to reform their local churches and communities, and more. We're living in a time of tremendous historical and social change. Christians have the opportunity now to begin building the culture and civilization of the next 1,000 years and beyond. It's an exciting time to be alive. So if you want to help raise the next generation of culture warriors, if you want your children to grow up with a love for Christ's kingdom and for their own nation, while at the same time learning how to defend America and rebuild the West, the easy-to-use Christendom curriculum is for you. Click the Learn More button to get in on the action. And thanks for listening.
So you had mentioned that the band has kind of broken up, but you'd like to see it get back together again.
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of great music I'd like to get out there. We probably have to figure out a way to record remotely, though, because we're several hours apart from each other now.
So the other members of your band, do they share your passion for the war between the states or not so much?
No, not so much.
So then the possibility of a Julie Hawkins band recording of period music probably isn't in the works then.
Well, I wouldn't say that. They're open to suggestion.
Okay.
I do have one song that I recorded, just me, and it's on iTunes. Actually, our CD is on iTunes, too. It's Julie Hawkins Band, and then the single that I recorded is a Civil War song called Gray as the Rose, and that's just under my name, Julie Hawkins.
I remember we talked about that. That was probably 2 years ago now, because you were actually I think you were the second guest. You may have been the first guest. You may have been on the very first DIXIE Heritage Hour show. You were either our first or second guest. I'll have to look that up. I should
Okay.
remember that, but
Yeah.
unfortunately I do not.
I don't remember.
And actually, if memory serves, John Schneider was our first guest, and you were our second guest. You were our very first guest. It was January 13th, 2018.
I was the first?
You were the first guest. John
Oh, wow.
Schneider was supposed to be the first guest. I'll tell you what happened. I recorded an entire interview with John. Or rather, I did an entire interview with John, and I forgot to push the record button. And when I realized that toward the end of the hour, he was like, look, man, he's like, I'd really like to do this again, but I don't have time. But I'll tell you what, call me next Wednesday, and I'll give you another shot at this.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that's how you wound up being the first guest and not the second guest. But it's probably good, though, because, and, maybe God allows certain things to happen. John was really going through it at the time, with his divorce and different things. And he realized I was a pastor, and he just unloaded on me with a lot of personal stuff.
Oh.
And a lot of that
okay.
stuff probably didn't need to go on the radio anyways. So I was able to talk to him on a very personal level, kind of on a pastoral level, and kind of talk him through some things. And it was probably best that a lot of that, even though we talked for probably about an hour and a half, and I probably could have edited a lot of that stuff out and still had a radio show to put together without too much of the personal stuff. It was probably best that, the second interview that we did came off a lot more, I think, professional and a lot more polished than that first one would have, even with a lot of editing. So yeah, but you were our first guest, and of course I remember we talked about Gray's the Confederate Rose, or Gray's the Rose, which was I remember the cover, it was you in a black dress in a cemetery.
Back when we were living down south, and I got roped into doing reenacting. I was reluctant at first because I was just like, I don't know about dressing up and going to book signings and all this. But the more I did it, the more fun I had. So,
Right.
yeah, it was kind of great. And then I joined the United Daughters of the Confederacy. I don't actually have an ancestor, so I'm like a honorary member, whatever they call, associate member. But then they did some research on my husband and found out that he had Confederate relatives. His great-grandfather, he rode under Forrest, and he was a Navajo interpreter or something like that. He went on after the war, and he became the Secretary of State, I believe, under Grant. His last name is Fish. It's kind of an interesting history there, and we heard about him, but we didn't know he was affiliated with the Confederacy. But the more research we did, the more we found out in his family, it split way back when. Half of his family stayed in Virginia, and actually there's a lot of Hawkins right around Chancellorsville battlefield. There's a Hawkins farm that's there, and a little cemetery that's filled with Hawkins. And so I guess his family, branched out. Some stayed in Virginia, some went down to Missouri, and then eventually they came back up to Iowa because they were farmers, and that's where all the good farmland is, So kind of interesting. Most of my family came over after the Civil War from Ireland and Germany.
Hello, I'm Tom Strain, Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. The Confederate flag, Confederate symbols, and the reputation of our Confederate ancestors has come under attack. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is actively fending off our detractors, but there is only so much that we can do. We need your help. Contact your local, state, and national elected politicians and tell them that you will not tolerate these attacks on our heritage. You can also visit scv.org, download an application to join us in our fight to preserve our Southern heritage. Visit scv.org today. If you don't have a Confederate ancestor and you are tired of American history disappearing, you can assist us by becoming a friend of the SCV. Please visit scvheritagedefense.org and make a donation to the Heritage Defense Fund. We hope that you will join us in the fight to defend the Confederate soldiers' good name.
when you say your ancestors came over from Ireland and Germany, which or both of those influences made it into your music?
Well, probably more the Irish. Been over to Ireland once. In 2012, it was the year my dad died, and he always wanted to go. It was a bittersweet trip, but it was really amazing. It's so beautiful over there. Just everywhere you look, every landscape is a photo op. It's just so gorgeous.
Last week, it would just happen that I interviewed Mary Fall. And Mary, if you remember the opening of Gods and Generals when all of the flags were flying and the song Going Home, and Mary, of course, did the opening to Gods and Generals. And so she also told the same story, how all of her ancestors who came to this country were Irish and German, and how, particularly the Irish, has kind of infected her music now.
Uh-huh.
And so why is it that the Irish infects the music and not the German? I love a good oompa band myself.
Yeah. I don't know. Something about that Celtic music just makes your spirit soar, I think. Mm. When you hear it. At least it does me. I just love it.
So, Colorado, I would say, would probably be a lot like Ireland as far as, the mountains and the evergreens and...
It's more arid here. It rains a lot in Ireland. That's why it's the Emerald Isle, because everything's green from all the rain. More arid here. It snows here. I don't think it's ever snowed in Ireland. I don't know.
Are you in the mountains, or are you more in eastern Colorado?
I'm in the mountains. I'm in Colorado Springs, where Pikes Peak is. Yeah, and the Air Force Academy and Fort Carson. Got a lot of military here, actually.
Because a lot of people don't realize the mountains kind of start west of Denver there, and everything east of that is like West Kansas.
Yeah, it's just flat and just, grasslands, pretty much. So, but then you get in the mountains, and there's lots of pine trees, and a lot of wildlife around here, which is fun.
Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't give you the chance to?
I could mention about the horses book. I looked it up and saw all the places where it's being sold, of course, online on Amazon, but there are some national parks that are carrying it. Bryce's Crossroads, Parker's Crossroads, Texas Civil War Museum in Fort Worth, Rum Creek Settler in Georgia, Museum and Library of Confederate History in Greenville, South Carolina. The United Daughters of the Confederacy has it, and they're in Richmond. Camp Plantation House in Louisiana. Books of the South in Birmingham. And then it just got picked up at Gettysburg. Okay. So that's pretty exciting news. Be glad when the country's up and running again and these places can open up. We just found out that our not mandatory, but our stay-at-home order is being lifted next Monday. So that's good news for us. I don't know how it is where you're at, but...
Well, I actually moved to Maryland here about 2 weeks before all this went crazy.
Stay-at-home order in place for a good month and a half. So everybody's getting pretty antsy around here. They even had a protest in Denver on Sunday, downtown at the Capitol. Okay. So I think the governor heard them loud and clear.
And on that note, we are out of time for this week's TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Show. I do hope that you'll go to our guest's website, www.jdrhawkins.com, and check out her books, Horses in Gray, A Beautiful Glittering Lie, A Beckoning Hellfire, and A Rebel Among Us. Also, go to my website, www.dixieheritage.net, and when you're there, you can check out our newsletter. We've got several back issues of the weekly newsletter there. You can give us your email address and subscribe, and you'll receive the newsletter absolutely free of charge each and every week. And when you do that, we'll also send you a free copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. So from each of us here at TBR Radio, until next week, God bless. See you again soon. Same bat time, same bat channel. next week. Until then, God bless.